Hello, this is Gary Boomer, and today I have with me Jon Hubbard, who's one of our most recent stockholders at Boomer Consulting. I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to Jon and have you learn more about his unique abilities. I know talent is big in all of our client firms, and it's certainly big at Boomer Consulting. And I think we've got a great story here for Jon to tell you this morning about his time with Boomer Consulting, his unique abilities, and what he sees in the future. So, Jon, if you don't mind, just start off. How did you start out at Boomer Consulting, and why did you even look at Boomer Consulting?
Yes, no, Gary, thanks for asking that question, and thanks for having me for this conversation. And it's kind of hard to believe it's been over 11 years now, but before Boomer, I was at kind of a tech startup company, and I was there for about 2.5 years. And I started to see there was really no path there. It was just lots of hours, very little, kind of reward for that, and started to look for something else, something different, and ended up just coming across Boomer Consulting in my research. And there just happened to be an opening at that time. And the opening was, I think the title was Strategic Project Associate. It was essentially someone that can just help manage the various projects happening in the organization. I answered the phones, I did a lot of admin work, essentially whatever someone needed me to be, I was that person. And, I actually was interested to apply because I felt that the field of consulting was so interesting and there was so much opportunity there. But as I went through the interview process, and I think I did a total of 4 interviews, Gary, with each interview, I got more and more interested in the company.
Well, great. I'm glad it worked out that way. Um, let's go back to kind of the beginning and tell our listeners a little bit about what you did for the first 3 years and what you really learned at Boomer Consulting in those initial 3 years.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, my role was pretty wide open. It was, you know, pretty much whatever needed to be done, I was going to be that person to help get that done. And so what that did was actually provide me with a lot of opportunity to learn about the business. And I mentioned that one of my responsibilities was answering the phones. There's probably not a better training program on the planet than answering phones at an organization, because you start to learn the clients, you start to learn, you know, who in the company needs to be connected to certain clients, and their areas of expertise and our clients' problems, and things of that sort. But here are the 3 big things I learned outside of just my job responsibilities. The 3 big things I learned in the first probably year is: one, if you want to move up in an organization or move forward in an organization, you first have to own your current role, right? Too many times we hear people maybe not exactly happy with their current role, and they're looking at that next opportunity, but they're missing a chance to actually own their current role. So that was one of the first things I learned is own your current role. And that's going to be the quickest path to advancing beyond that role. The second thing I learned is my future was mine to define. It wasn't anyone else's to define. It was me. And so as I was sitting there thinking about, my role, I really enjoyed it. I was owning it. And I knew that there was a blue ocean in front of me, that as kind of the multitude of areas I could get into within Boomer, I had that opportunity to do that. And I think the third thing I learned, and Gary, this was probably something you mentioned to me even in my initial interviews, was talking about unique abilities. And so if you are owning your role, you see your future as yours to define, and you're learning about your unique abilities. And that is not only just being kind of reflective on yourself, but also asking others within the organization about what they see your strengths being, where they see you really um, kind of, excelling. You combine those three things, and you're going to move up or move forward in the organization.
Well, that's great, John. It's good to hear your story. It gives me pride in our organization. But you've changed. You've grown a lot. And how have your responsibilities really changed over the years?
Yeah, it's been an interesting path, and as I mentioned to you prior to this conversation that we are recording now, that it was fun for me to kind of think back on some of these and see that path. So as I started in that kind of project management, project admin position, I remember the day of being in a team meeting where we had decided that we were going to hire a marketing person, a marketing manager slash director, someone to really lead the marketing. And that meeting ended, and I followed Sandra Wiley, who's now our president, followed her directly into her office and said, I want to be that person. And long story short, she said, okay. So I ended up kind of leading our marketing efforts for a couple years. And then there was an opportunity to not only lead marketing, but also lead our sales and business development and kind of make the alignment between the two even stronger. So there for a few years, I kind of transitioned into that. And then we started to get clients asking us, Gary, to help them in their areas of growth, marketing and business development. So I started to do consulting on that. And that leads all the way up to today, where now I'm a shareholder and I'm a consultant, and I am working with firms every week on their marketing or business development strategies.
Talk a little bit about how you develop those skills and some of the certification programs you've gone through in order to establish yourself as a thought leader. I really like to use the term results leader because
Hmm.
I think you're after results, not thoughts. But talk a little bit about that roadmap and how you got there. Because I know you mentioned unique ability, which I think is very important, and our listeners should learn more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing, and this falls outside of a certification or even outside of a formal training program, is one thing I learned as I kind of went through that journey was the things happening outside the accounting profession. And my kind of area of interest and expertise has always been growth, marketing, and sales. I learned over the years that what was happening outside the accounting profession, as it pertains to marketing, as it pertains to business development, is actually really relevant to the accounting profession. And so, one of the things I always try to do is be aware and read and learn about what's going on outside the profession, because I think I knew that was going to be relevant as we started to help firms. So that was one thing. The other thing, and this, again, is beyond certifications and beyond formal training programs, is, and this is something you've talked a lot about over the years, Gary, is you first have to be committed to something before you're confident in that. So when doors open for me over the years to speak, to write articles, to go out and do consulting engagements, I was committed to doing those things before I had the confidence that I was going to be good at them or that I knew enough, or, all those things that we have going through our head anytime a new opportunity arises, right? And then, just in addition to that, I mentioned writing, right? No one thinks they're a good writer, but the best way to become a good writer is to write more and just do it, you know? And so that was one area of expertise, or one area of growth I put a lot of work into, is how do I become a better writer? Because if I can articulate my ideas, articulate my thoughts in a compelling, clear way, then that's going to help move the profession forward. Um, One of the certifications I did pursue early on, and I think I pursued this even just a year after being at Boomer, was the Colby certification, right? That was an area that was identified that I could help firms in. And for those listening that aren't familiar with Colby, Colby is essentially an assessment you can take that identifies your instinctive strengths. And it's something that's really relevant to the accounting profession. It's used in all sorts of, industries, but the accounting profession has proven to be really relevant. So early on, I got the opportunity to pursue that certification. And I did that, and that really helped me start to get comfortable working with firms, um, in the areas of coaching or talent development or hiring, um, as well.
Well, that's great, John. And I think this unique ability deal, I wish I would have known about Colby in my previous career as a partner in a regional accounting firm, in that it would have helped much better in partner communications and communications throughout the firm, as well as I think relieve me to focus on what my unique abilities really were, rather than try to do everything that other people wanted me to do.
Mhm.
And we see that a lot in accounting firms. People get burned out because that's just not their unique ability of what they're trying to do. So you mentioned the professional development side. You've also gone through some other professional
Mhm.
development with regard to the marketing side. You might
Right.
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so about it may have been 2 years ago at this point, but even prior to that, so probably 4 years ago, we were undergoing here a kind of a refresh of our messaging and our branding and our website and all of that. And we ended up coming across an organization called StoryBrand who helps organizations kind of figure out how to communicate about what they do in a more clear and compelling way. And we went through that program just for internal purposes first, so we can talk about what we do in a better way. And that is translated on our website now. That's, you can see that in our presentations and other social media and marketing. But through that process, again, we started to get clients asking us, hey, we see what you've done with your messaging and marketing, and can you help us do that? So long story short, a couple years ago, I went through the Story Brand Guide certification, which again is something that is outside the accounting profession, but we knew the accounting profession needed this. And that was a week-long certification program to learn a framework that we can then take to accounting firms to help them clarify their messaging, clarify their marketing strategy, and attract more of those ideal clients and communicate more clearly about what they do. And it's been amazing that while we thought when we started that it may be a fringe service, it may be a service that only a few firms will get. I think last year proved that every firm out there sees a lot of opportunity to improve their messaging. And now we're working with a lot of firms around the country, helping them clarify their messaging.
Well, we're seeing John's growth pattern is bringing back a lot of memories to me, all fond memories, by the way. But you also might talk about how you became five-star certified, and then
Mhm.
also your involvement with Strategic Coach, which has been culturally a big um, asset to Boomer Consulting.
Right. Yeah, I can speak to that for sure. And both of those items, in addition to others, Gary, that you mentioned, you were very vital in connecting the dots for me and providing me those opportunities. So I'll speak to Five Star first. So this was a program created by Troy Waugh over the years, and there was an opportunity where, for the first time, someone outside of his organization could be certified to actually deliver their Five Star client service training program. And so, through some conversations with you, Gary, and you seeing in me before I even saw in myself an opportunity that I could actually do this, I remember you invited me on a phone call with Troy, got it all set up for me. I went through the training, and my very first solo consulting engagement was a Five Star engagement. And it went really well. I was really nervous about it, but it went really well. And I remember right as it ended, I was driving back to the airport and you called me. And I can tell you were smiling when you called me because you said, "Hey, John, how did it go?" And it was a fun conversation to have. And that was kind of a big moment in my career because you helped support me in a lot of different ways leading up to that. And I just needed to have the commitment to do it and trusted that the confidence would come later. Now, moving to strategic coach, that has been instrumental in my development. And you've been a part of strategic coach for over 20 years, right, Gary?
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah. And so, for those listening that aren't familiar with strategic coach, they are an entrepreneurial kind of coaching company where their whole coaching strategy is tailored to entrepreneurs and helping them have the right tools, develop the right mindsets for actually growing their organization. And me being invited to participate in that with a lot of people outside the accounting profession really helped accelerate my growth, helped actually me gain a lot of confidence, and gave me a lot of tools that in any situation I'm in any given week, where we're brainstorming how to launch a new service, whether we're trying to improve a current service or whether we're trying to um, kind of work as a team internally to improve something. There are tools and approaches from Strategic Coach that I use yet to this day. So that was instrumental in my development also.
Well, John, let's kind of switch to the internal aspect of this. We've talked a lot about how you've grown with external resources, which I think is they're unique, and they would benefit probably anyone in our profession. But from an internal standpoint, you now head up our marketing circle, which is comprised of the CMOs or the partners in charge of marketing in some of the largest firms. I'd like to have you talk about that, plus also about how you learned the community concept and what you learned from other consultants at Boomer Consulting. Because one of the things you've had an advantage, I believe, that I didn't have coming into this was the association with other people that have unique abilities different than yours, serving a similar audience. In other words, we're working within accounting firms day to day, but we have people with different areas of expertise.
Right. So, um, yes, I'd be happy to speak about that.
Excuse
So
me.
early on in my career at Boomer, I had the opportunity to start speaking and facilitating some of our circle meetings. So speaking at some of our circle meetings and facilitating some of those. One of the first ones was our Boomer Technology circles, and that experience, having the fact that you help create that model, Gary, and that was in place, and that was moving forward, and the fact that I could get plugged into that context was hugely important to my development because I got to see firsthand um, of the value created when we bring our clients together and facilitate the types of discussions that they need to be having with each other. And that taught me a lot of things. But one thing is, to be a strong consultant, you don't always have to have the answer. You have to provide context, content, and probably be better at asking questions than you do at giving answers. And so I got to see that play out there. Fast forward to many years being involved in various circles, and I'm involved in several now in addition to the marketing circle. And coupled with just my expertise in growth, marketing, business development, we started to get some of our larger firm clients coming to me saying, "Hey, can you replicate this circle model, but for the CMOs, for the partners in charge of marketing?" And through a lot of conversations and a lot of hard work using our team here at Boomer, we created just a couple years ago the marketing circle. And for those that are listening that don't know this, Gary and I facilitate that together. And you know, in the question you just asked, Gary, you made the comment that I had some resources that you didn't have. after our very first marketing circle meeting, I shared my appreciation for you of kind of how you helped um, just, provide all these resources for me over the years and, in my development. And I'll never forget what you said. You said, well, there's no reason it should be harder for you, or there's no reason it should be as hard for you as it was for me. The whole point is to make it easier for that next generation. And that's something that I appreciate and something that I want to be sure I do for the generation after me as well.
Well, that's great, John. And I think as we close this out, I'd kind of like to have you share what your vision is for the future, not only your own vision, but also the vision for the profession and how important marketing and sales are going to be in our profession going forward.
Right. So from a kind of a broad stroke perspective, I think the five areas we are currently helping accounting firms in, and that is, leadership, talent, process, technology, and growth, are going to be relevant for the foreseeable future, because anything a firm is doing can fall underneath that. Specifically with growth, which is one of my areas of passion, focus, and um, you know expertise, is that it's imperative that firms evolve their growth strategies as they look to actually deliver more advisory and, honestly, probably just as important, consulting services to their clients. How they market and sell those services is going to be fundamentally different than maybe how they grew their tax and audit practices. And so some of those things include the fact that marketing and business development in firms more than ever has to be aligned. There has to be a connection between the two, because the marketplace is too competitive. There's too many services your firm is offering for a disconnect between that. The other big piece, and we talk a lot about this, Gary, in the marketing circle group, is the future is digital. And that is true for marketing and business development. So what does it look like for firms to have a digital first approach to marketing? And that includes, not only the type of content that you're creating for your clients and prospects, but also the automations you have set up, and just that whole digital aspect there, that it is so vitally important. And there are lots of other professions that are blowing us out of the water in this already. And we need to be able to be better in those areas. And in the area of business development, we're actually going to have to improve as a profession of kind of doing what I shared with you earlier, being committed before we have the confidence. Too often, our firms really struggle at launching new services, trying out, whether it's strategic planning or succession planning or, all sorts of services that they should be delivering. They have to get better at actually doing that. And you say a lot, Gary, sell the tickets, then produce the show. And that is one area in business development our profession has to become better at, is sell the tickets, then produce the show.
Well, that certainly takes courage. And John, you've demonstrated that in our firm. And I'm very excited to have you as a fellow shareholder at Boomer Consulting, and know things are going to be great in the future. We build a great, unique ability team that we can learn from each other. And we also do have access to outside resources. So I think we're just about out of time. I want to thank you for spending the time with us this morning, and encourage any of our listeners to give John a call or send him an email, john.hubbard@boomer.com, and he certainly can connect you with some resources in this area. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it.